All right, welcome back to week 5 of the 5-part slump methodology around self-sabotage. Today we're talking about P, the final letter of slump, which is perfectionism. Perfectionism is huge and pervasive everywhere in our society. And if I had to pick, all of these things are so important, but this one is one that I've seen time and time again derail people from every different type of goal, no matter what type of pursuit they're trying to have. And this is an extremely important one, and it kind of ties all the others together. So perfectionism, it goes by a lot of names. It could be all or nothing thinking, right? Black or white thinking, this or that, in or out, on or off. They all mean the same thing. It's perfect or it's not. You're all in or you're out. It's this or it's that, right? And we can think of countless classic examples, right? This is the person who is dieting and everything's going well, and the moment they have one little quote unquote slip up, they say screw it, and they throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? That's a big thing with perfectionism. They have one little offbeat moment and they say screw it, right? This is the person that's been consistent with a streak, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's writing, whether it's doing whatever they need to do with meditation, whatever, and they've going day in and day in and day in and day out. And the first time they mess up one time and they miss one day because it messed up the streak and it's not perfect anymore, they end up missing another day and another day and another day. This is the person who has a quote unquote bad Friday, whether with food, with drinking, with exercise, with whatever, and then they let it roll into the weekend, and then they let it roll into a whole week because they got knocked off of their perfect streak. So when it comes to perfectionism, a common question that I hear is that, like, but shouldn't we try, right? Isn't it worth a shot? Shouldn't the goal be to be perfect, even if I don't get there? And this is common flawed thinking because it's impossible, right? It seems logical, right? It seems like, okay, like, yes, like try to be perfect, right? If you shoot for the stars or shoot for the moon, at least you'll land on the stars or something like that. But in reality, aiming for perfection only holds you back from ever achieving anything. So it's not shoot for the moon and you land on the stars. It's really you're shooting for the moon and you don't get anywhere because you're trying to get somewhere that is impossible. So the thing about, again, perfectionism, there's a lot of words that we've already gone over. And the biggest one is expectations. So when you're a perfectionist or someone who deals with perfectionism, it's having unrealistic expectations. And usually those expectations are around your results and your outcomes, right? This is the weight on the scale. This is the number in your bank account. This is the success of your business endeavor. This is how your wife or your husband takes the gift that you gave them, or how they hear you when you bring up a complex topic. These things are outcomes that, if we remember, our sphere of influence, sphere of control, all lie squarely outside of your sphere of control, outside of your sphere of influence. So when we're trying to be perfect, we have unrealistic expectations around the results, around the outcomes. And the reason that this is so detrimental is because we cannot control these things. We don't control outcomes. We don't control results. We don't control whatever we expect to get out of something. And when you have your goal to be perfect, you are setting yourself up for disappointment because it is unobtainable. There is no such thing as perfect. You cannot have perfection. Even if you chase perfection around a certain goal, again, say it's weight loss, say it's a money thing, say it's a job thing. The thing about goals is they keep evolving. So even if you can get it at a certain point, it keeps going, right? You're quote unquote chasing the dragon, right? So anyone who's been to the gym has had this experience of you've never lifted a weight before, and then 10 pounds is a lot. So you go to the gym the first time and you lift the weight, and now 10 pounds isn't a lot anymore. So you want to lift the bar. The bar is 45 pounds. Then once you lift the bar, you want to lift the plate. So it's 135. And then once you can lift a plate, then you want to go to 185, then 225. It keeps moving itself. The goalposts keep on moving. So when you're striving for perfection, that goalpost keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and it keeps stretching away from you. And because of that, because you can never actually catch it, the only possible outcome then becomes overwhelm, burnout, and eventually self-sabotage and quitting, right? Because eventually, we've talked about this in the past, that your brain will only allow you to keep trying something and not getting the result for so long. So this is why it's so important to go over this and to understand this. And this is why this holds so many people back. And this is why this leads to so many people sabotaging themselves, is because you're striving for an unobtainable ideal. If you can never get it, you will only keep trying for so long. You'll try, you won't get it. You'll try, you won't get it. You'll try, you won't get it. And your brain will say, well, this is a bad deal. We're not going to keep trying. That is self-sabotage. That is you talking yourself out of it. Where if you didn't actually strive for perfection and just worked on the things that we can control, right? Not the results and the outcomes, but the actions, but the things that are within our sphere of control, as we've spoken about, you would actually stay in it long enough to get the result. And the thing is, now, I understand that when we're talking about perfectionism, it seems right. It feels right? Because you want to be successful. You want to get it right. So why wouldn't I want to be perfect? Why wouldn't I hold myself to a high standard? How can I sit here and say that I shouldn't get things correctly, that I shouldn't get things right? But the thing is that when you hold yourself to an ideal of perfection, everything else feels like failure, capital F failure. And if you remember all the way back to week 1, we spoke about the difference between little f failure and capital F failure. And little f failure is feedback. Capital F failure is that failure is final. And that's what our body and our brain avoids at all costs. So when you strive for solely perfection, everything outside of that feels like a death sentence. And it feels like all of your effort is for naught. And everything that you've been trying to, been striving to, been working towards is just thrown away, which isn't the case. So when you're looking at perfection, it feels like this, right? There's this whole world of possible outcomes. And your goal is that one tiny little red dot right there. And you have to land the spaceship exactly on that red dot to get your goal. And that everywhere else outside of that is failure. So it becomes extremely important that your aim is perfect, that every little thing goes perfectly. If you understand, if a plane takes off from JFK in New York towards LAX in California, it has to be perfectly en route the entire time. Even to be off by 1 degree in the beginning, as it launches and heads west, will actually end up not being 1 degree off in LAX, but it will end up with that plane being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or in Canada. Because 1 degree, as we spread over time, as time goes, it compounds and compounds and compounds. So it feels like you cannot even let yourself be 1 degree off. You have to be perfect because you have to have the perfect aim to land directly on that goal, to land the flip, right? Like in gymnastics, they have to have that perfect stick the landing. That's how it feels. And it feels like anything but that would inherently be failure, capital F failure. But in reality, it's not like that. In reality, it's more like this, where in the world of possible outcomes, there's a lot of ways to actually get to your goal. Your goal is much bigger than just the one perfect outcome that you have set in your head, right? So this is, if your goal is being a successful entrepreneur and you have your one new product launch that you've really been driving, and now it feels like that has to be the thing, and that you have to get this perfectly, and that you have to build up this product and talk about it and all this stuff. And that's the only way to land your goal right there. But in reality, that's a tiny, tiny sliver of what your goal actually looks like. Your goal is to be a successful entrepreneur. And by focusing, hyper focusing on what that one perfect outcome could be, you're sabotaging yourself away from receiving all of the rest of the success. So this whole circle here is success, but you're so focused on landing on that one dot perfectly that you actually end up not getting it. Right? Again, it's the same thing with weight loss. It's the same thing with diets. It's the same thing with exercise. All of these things, success comes in so many shapes. And the main thing that derives success is time in the game, consistency over time. That's what this whole course is about, not getting you to a place where you're going to talk yourself out of it. You're going to quit on yourself. You're going to sabotage yourself out of staying in the game. And that hyper focus on trying to land on this one little dot right here is what's going to get you to self-sabotage, because it feels like even you land right next to it, just a millimeter off, it feels like failure. It feels like capital F failure. But in reality, you can still hit your goal without being perfect. And this is important because in reality, we have expectations. Again, expectations around what success should look like. You're starting to see themes here: shoulds, expectations, certainty, right? I'm certain it should look a certain way. And if you look on the left, we expect progress to be linear. We expect that if I put in effort A, I will get result B. If I do this, then I get this. That would be fair. And that was what we expect. So that if things work that way, then it's like, okay, if I just perfectly put in all of the exact efforts that I need to, I will get the result. But in reality, results don't come like that. Results come as they will. And we can influence them with our actions, but we don't get to decide, remember, going back to our spheres of influence, when the results come in any sphere. And the reason most people will quit, self-sabotage, and talk themselves out of things is because it's not going as perfectly as they think that it should or could or would, because we're comparing ourselves to others. We're comparing ourselves to what it looked like in the past. You're comparing your journey to a friend's journey, or you're comparing yourself to what you think that you deserve when you do the perfect amount of work. But we can't be perfect all the time, one, and even if we could, we don't get to decide that perfection actually begets the result. I can have the perfect business strategy and not get a single client. I can do the perfect workout and not have a six-pack abs. I can be the perfect spouse and my significant other still wants a divorce. I can be the perfect parent and my kid still ends up hating me. There's so many things that are outside of our control in this world. So that hyper focus on perfection, one, it's not obtainable, but two, even if it were, it's going to, in a roundabout way, lead to self-sabotage because it brings up a huge issue of fairness. We don't like things to be unfair. Our brain, our subconscious mind does not like things to be unfair. So if you are doing things, quote unquote, perfectly, and you feel you're doing things perfectly, but the reality of the way your results are coming are not matching up to your expectations, that's a perfect time for your thought gremlins to come in and say, hey, this isn't fair. We're doing perfectly and it's not working. We should quit. This isn't right. This isn't working. So when you are a perfectionist, and you don't have to identify as this, again, we all have elements of perfectionism in us at times. There's certain key outcomes that will tend to happen. The first is paralysis. You may have heard of paralysis by analysis. And this is basically when people are using their need to be perfect, and it stops them from ever starting, right? This is the person who is doing more and more research and always thinking and iterating and never actually getting in there and getting their hands dirty and doing the work. This is the antithesis of what we spoke about 2 weeks ago with uncertainty. Right? So because you're not certain, I can't start. Well, I can't start until I know all of the different possible outcomes, until I know exactly what I'm going to do. We need clarity. Remember, we've talked about clarity before. We do want to have a clear mission and a clear path to success, but it will never be certain. Okay. We also have to understand that perfection inherently leads to unhappiness and discontent because it is an impossible goal, right? It is an impossible standard to hold yourself to. Imagine if you're a parent, or imagine if you were a parent, if you're not one, if you only loved your child when they got 100 on the test, 99, 98, 97, down to zero. There's, all of those things are then failure because you're holding them to an impossible standard. And that's what you're doing to yourself when you're treating yourself as a perfectionist. You're holding yourself to an impossible standard and only giving yourself the love and care that you deserve when you meet that one little red dot in that circle, as opposed to all of the time, which is when we truly deserve it. And then this also leads to a feeling of incompleteness and not enoughness, because even if, again, you could get that 100 on the test every time, even if you could adhere to that impossible standard of perfection, it's still, the goalposts are always moving. So even perfect isn't perfect because the goal always gets bigger. You're always going to want more. This is human nature. Once you get $1 million, you want 10 million. Once you lose 20 pounds, you want to lose 25. Once you have some success in some area, you want success in another area. Things don't end. So by chasing that perfection, rather than being happy with where you are when you're there, you're inherently going to feel like you're incomplete. And it goes in both directions, right? So we talked about perfectionism already from the aspect of like, okay, I need to be perfect. And when I hold myself to that, it's an unrealistic standard. But also, perfectionism can be self-sabotage because it stops us from actually achieving the thing. And that's what we want, right? Because a lot of times deep down, we know that it's impossible to be perfect, right? So we know that if we're dieting to lose weight, there's probably never going to be a time when you never eat ice cream again, or that you 100% cut out a carb for the rest of your life. But by holding yourself to a standard of perfection, it allows you wiggle room to continually sabotage yourself so that you don't ever have to succeed. So a lot of times people will self-sabotage around their success because they're afraid of what success brings. So this is an example would be, again, the dieter who fears that if they are consistent with their diet, then they go, well, what do I have to eat like this all the time? What, I can never have another alcoholic drink? Oh, I can never party with my friends. Oh, I have to be that weird guy who's counting my calories all the time. So instead they go, oh, well, I messed up, might as well stop. Oh, well, I messed up and it's Friday, might as well start on Monday. Oh, well, oops, I screwed up again because I was trying to be perfect and I couldn't. January 1st, I'll start then, right? This is the business owner who knows that if they are successful enough, that their business will reach a new level such that they will have to hire employees, such that they'll have more responsibility on their shoulders. So they hold themselves to an impossible standard of perfection, and that makes it so they can never actually achieve the success that they possibly could. And one of my personal business mentors, his name is Pat Rigsby, he's a fitness business coach. He has a saying that I love, which is you only get paid for done. So if you go think about that entrepreneur that I was just saying, who is afraid of success. So they're always iterating and tinkering, and they have to get it just right. They never actually do it. They never ship the work, right? Seth Godin is one of my favorite authors, has a saying it says, you have to ship your work. Nothing matters until you ship it. You can do all the tweaking, all the iterating, all the whatevering, but until you hit the send button on that email, until you say done, until you hit submit, or whatever it is that you have to do. And again, this can be literal or theoretical, or hypothetical. Until you actually submit it and say it's done, nothing matters. And perfectionism is the exact opposite of this. You will never ship your work when you're waiting for it to be perfect. You'll continue to tweak. What if it was just a little bit better? Oh, what about this? Oh, wait, no, I have to get it just right. And if you think back to the uncertainty talk that I gave a couple of weeks ago, I used the tattoo rule for this, right? Remember, you're never going to be certain. You have to have a level of faith, and there has to be a level of it's done when it's done. And understand that if you are constantly getting to this point where it could be finished, but you could keep working on it, this could be a sign that you are self-sabotaging yourself because of a fear of success, as I was just talking about. So Instead of being perfect, there's a lot of other P words that we can use: persistence, patience, perseverance, prioritization, practice. I love these words. The reason I love these words is because these all start and end with you. Are within your sphere of control. You can choose to be more persistent. You can control your patience. You can persevere. You can prioritize better. You can practice and get better at things. And you can do all of these things without holding yourself to a standard of perfection. So when does perfectionism show up? And the real answer is all the time. This is pervasive and it's ever present in pretty much everything that you're going to do. Especially if you are a self-identified perfectionist, it's going to be the hardest thing for you. So in the beginning, right? Should I even start? This is going back to certainty. It's like, well, I can't start until I know all of the things, until I've done all the research, until I know exactly the plan that I'm going to do from step 1 to step 100. And I need to know every single thing. And this is the person who is always taking in information, but never acting. Again, it's important to be educated. You want to know that you're taking good action, but at the same time, going back to the previous slide, you only get paid for done. You have to ship the work eventually. So if you're continually iterating and never giving yourself a chance to start, that is a form of self-sabotage in and of itself. And it's actually more dangerous because we pat ourselves on the back. We go, well, no, it's not that I'm not doing anything. I'm working hard. I'm just trying. I'm trying. I just have to I'll figure it out one day, but we understand that there will never be any certainty. So you have to be able to take that action. And then perfectionism is also going to come up in the middle when things aren't going the way that they should. They aren't going the way that you expected. They aren't going the way that they would if they were perfect, right? If things went perfectly, I would be here by now. But things didn't go perfectly. Things don't go perfectly. Things won't go perfectly, and they never will go perfectly. So if you hold yourself to that one standard, that's you again trying to land on that little red dot in the circle, as opposed to understanding that there's a huge surface area for you to land your goal on. And then it's going to come up in the end too when you don't want to finish, right? When this is the person who won't hit send, who won't ship the work, who is continually re-editing their manuscript, but never actually submitting it to an editor. This is the person who is never going to put in for that job, put in for that promotion, put in for that raise because they have to just finish one more project to impress their boss or something like that. Again, this is a fear of success that is causing you to sabotage yourself in a way that doesn't feel like sabotage because it feels like you're doing more. It's like, well, it's not sabotage. I'm doing the most. You have to be able to take a step back and see that your perfection is getting in the way of you actually getting the result, right? And this is the whole thing, is that going back to where I said before, it feels like the right thing. It feels like being perfect is the right thing, except that being perfect is actually stopping you from getting any result at all. And we need to flip that. Getting a result, even though it's not perfect, at least gets a result. So when we're dealing with perfectionism, right away, loops right back around to the beginning. Shoulds and supposed tos, expectations. We cannot have any shoulds. We cannot have any expectations around the way that this is going to look. Again, you can focus on those other P words: persistence, perseverance, practice, these things that you do control. But we cannot have expectations around the way the results will shake out. And we cannot aim for a perfect result because we don't even control any result, let alone a perfect one. And we want to create clarity, right? So we spoke about creating clarity and creating that roadmap and knowing, okay, what am I actually working towards? What are the steps I need to get there? But we have to be okay with clarity and realize that clarity is not certainty. Yes, you want to get clear. You want to know the next step, but you do not need to wait until you are 100% certain with every step along the way to take action. Action and clarity will illuminate more. There's an analogy I love, which is if you are driving down the road in the fog and you try to look off into the distance, you can't see anything, right? If there's super dense fog, you can't see anything. And if you're trying to see all the way down the road, you're actually blinded, and people will pull off the road and wait for the fog to dissipate. However, if you're driving down the road in this super dense fog and you have your headlights on, you might not be able to see a mile down the road, but you can see 10 feet in front of you. You can see what's coming up directly ahead of you. And then you drive a little bit farther and you can see 10 feet in front of you, and you can drive and see 10 feet in front of you. So you don't need the certainty of everything down the road. You just need to do what the next step right in front of you is. You just need to be able to see the 10 feet in front of you, and then the 10 feet in front of you, and then the 10 feet in front of you, and then the 10 feet in front of you. So when we're creating clarity, it's that clarity only needs to be around the next step. It doesn't have to be, I have 100% certainty around every single step along the way things are going to shake out, because again, that's perfection. We don't know how things are going to shake out. You don't know how the result is going to happen. You don't know if I take 3 steps, what's going to be the result, where I'll be even at that time, where I'll be a month from now, 2 months from now. So we want to have ideas. We want to have a loose roadmap, but we don't want to hold ourselves to it with certainty. And then that goes right into the third tool or action step, which is to just take imperfect action. This is the tattoo rule, right? You have to get 95% of the way there and go. By waiting to be 100% certain, you are sabotaging yourself. By trying to have all of the information, you are sabotaging yourself. You will never have all of the information. It's impossible. We live in a world of infinite information. Every Google search that you type in will bring 100 million to 1 billion answers. You cannot know everything, and you don't need to know everything. Again, this is an unrealistic, unobtainable ideal that holding yourself to only keeps you stuck, and you're sabotaging yourself from your success. So you have to be willing to take action and then iterate, rather than trying to get everything right before you take action. Take imperfect action. Again, little f failure. Failure is feedback. Even if you don't land perfectly, you will get feedback and you will iterate and you will do better the next time. That is infinitely better than holding yourself to a standard of perfection, which is unobtainable, you'll never get to. And the only possible outcome is burning yourself out and sabotaging yourself and deciding that you're going to quit because it's not going to happen. Any questions on perfection?